Shalom to everybody. Good evening. We're learning the Peticha LeChochmat HaKabbalah, number 12. But we need to understand, since all the main aspect of the created being and all of creation itself is only the desire to receive, and what's beyond this is not completely the creation. That is to say, that only the aspect of desire to receive pleasure and enjoyment is considered the creation. Anything beyond this characteristic is the creator, not the creation, and draws forth directly from the essence of God. Everything above the desire to receive. And that's drawing forth from the characteristic of God and not from the creation. So if the desire to receive pleasure and enjoyment is the characteristic of the created being, why do we consider this to be an aspect of coarseness? Because this is a central point of creation. Why are we calling this something coarse and dirty that needs to be refined, to be cleaned through the Torah and the mitzvot, to the extent that we're not able to arrive at our purpose without this refinement? The Rebbe is asking if the question's clear. The Rebbe asks if something's not clear, to write the question right away what's not clear. Number 13. And the idea is that similarly to how physical matters are separated from one another by distance, so spiritual entities are separated from one another by having difference in characteristics. In spirituality, we're not talking in terms of physical space, so how can there be distance? What's considered close, what's considered far in spirituality? Being similar or different, it determines the closeness or distance in spiritual terms. We can find this also in this world. For example, two people that have similar opinions, they love one another, and the distance of physical space doesn't distance them. But in the opposite, when the two people are very distant in opinions, then they hate each other. And even if they're close in physical space, it doesn't bring them together at all. This is to say that in terms of characteristics, physical space doesn't make any difference in their closeness. If they're close in their opinions, they love one another. So the physical space won't separate them. And if they're far from one another in their opinions, then being close in physical space doesn't bring them together. It's the similarity in their opinions that brings them close, and the difference in their opinions that distances them. And if, for example, the nature of one is completely opposite from that of the other, then the two people are as distant from one another as east is from west. So these are examples that the Baal HaSulam is giving in terms of people. And in this way we can understand in spirituality that all the concepts of closeness and distance that we speak in spiritual terms are talking about only a difference in form, meaning a difference in characteristic. That according to the distance in characteristics, things become separate from one another, and from the similarity of characteristics, become close to one another. So from this we can understand that even though the desire to receive is obligated to be in the created being, because it's the aspect of the created being, and it's the vessel that's fitting to receive the purpose of creation. But with all of this, it makes the created being completely separate from the creator, because there is a difference in characteristic of complete oppositeness, because the creator is only giving and doesn't have a spark of receiving at all. There is not in the creator any desire to receive. God is giving, and a person is completely desired to receive and has no spark of giving. That is to say that a person is the complete opposite of the creator from the side of our nature. Even if a person is doing good deeds, the person wants to receive from them. Automatically a person is thinking what they're going to get from their good deeds, whether in this world or the world to come. So there's no oppositeness more distant than this. That is to say, there's nothing more distant than between the creator and the creation. The creator is completely giving, complete love, and the created being is completely receiving, completely ego. So there's nothing more distant than the creator and the creation. So we find therefore that necessarily this distance in characteristic separates the created being from the creator. That is to say that in every man and woman we have a divine soul which is completely giving, but it's completely hidden, and the person needs a lot of spiritual work in order to reveal it. So in terms of our natural state, this is the situation. And that's the reason that we're distant from the Creator, and that's why we're not experiencing the Creator, feeling the Creator. We're in the world of God, not experiencing God. Why? Because we're completely opposite from God. Questions? The Rebbe asks what it means, tzura, a form, and the Rebbe says it means a characteristic. The way that God is compassionate, that we are to be compassionate. The Rebbe is asked if there is a desire to receive that connects us to God. The Rebbe says relatively. If we compare two people, one wants to receive only material pleasures, and the other one doesn't want to receive material pleasures, but wants to receive connection to God. So relatively, desire to receive connection to God brings the person close to God, because the desire to receive closeness to God is much higher than the desire to receive material pleasures. But in absolute terms, the desire to receive separates us from God. But there's relative terms and different levels, as we've spoken about. There's a question, if we attribute only positive characteristics to God, how do we have negative ones? Is this something newly created? The Rebbe says, yes. The Rebbe says that this negative characteristic that was created, the desire to receive, is positive. The same way that if you have a cup and it doesn't have a space inside of it, then it can't hold anything. So this lack is meant to serve a positive purpose. This is the essence of a person, and this is our purpose, to be able to receive. Now, we have the problem of the difference in form, difference in characteristic that needs to be fixed. When a person is in a state of giving, then a person has connection to God. The way that God is giving, the person is giving. Like our sages say, how do we attach to God? The way that God is compassionate, for us to be compassionate. There's a question, if every pleasure comes from the desire to receive. The Rebbe says generally, yes. But there's something above the natural state. When a person receives from God the power of the desire to give, when a person receives from God the power of loving others, then the person has pleasure also in giving. The way that God has pleasure in giving and loving the created beings. So when a person connects to God, has pleasure from giving, and this is already something above nature. There's a question. Sometimes we need to receive in order to be able to give. The Rebbe says that's correct. Sometimes we need to receive in order to give. Correct. But the psychological question is, if the receiving is done out of love for the other, or the receiving is done out of loving oneself and using that in order to give to the other. It's a very, very fine differentiation. And this differentiation makes a difference whether we're connecting to God or disconnecting. Because we need to understand that attachment to God or separation from God is not something that's approximate. It's an exact science. It's not something unclear. It's on this point, whether we're doing something for the other, out of love for the other, or for ourselves. It could be theoretically that we're doing a lot of things for other people, but it's not truly out of wanting to give to them or loving them. There's all different reasons of why we could be giving to others. The Rebbe's asked, the fourth aspect of Malchut, how did it come to the opposite of form? The Rebbe says because this sphera is the great desire to receive, that has no aspect of giving, and this is what separates it from the Creator. The Rebbe's asked an important question. God can do anything, and God could give the created being the desire to give. So why doesn't God give to all the created beings the desire to give? Why did God create us with the desire to receive? Afterwards, we need to fix this through the way of either the spiritual work of Torah or through suffering. Couldn't God just from the beginning created us with the desire to give and loving? Then the world would look completely different. The Rebbe says this is an important and good question. The answer is like this. Everything needs a vessel in preparation. And the more that the vessel in preparation are bigger, afterwards the result is more grandiose. If we receive something without preparing, then the result is less. Also here, the Creator wants to give goodness to the creation, so naturally created a desire to receive pleasure and enjoyment. Now, this is the basic vessel. Now, since God wants the creation to be in attachment to God, and then the pleasure of the created being will be millions times more. So after God created the creation with the characteristic of the desire to receive, then the Creator begins to influence the creation to give. Now, there's the way of the spiritual work of Torah, and there's the way of suffering. God gave us two ways. The way of these two ways, we are meant to arrive at the desire to give. But God wants us to make effort, to work. Because what comes through effort has strong results. What comes without effort has weak results only. Therefore, God created the nature of desire to receive. And this is the created being that's different from the Creator. Now God asks the created being to attain a desire to give until it attains a state that wants to receive pleasure and enjoyment in order to give, where both of these characteristics of receiving and giving serve together. So that's the answer. I know of parents now in the United States that are able to give lots to their children, that they're very rich, but giving all of this would break down the system, wouldn't be good for the kids. So I heard that they're giving the children at first just a little bit, and then they have to make some effort, and then they can receive some more. Because when we're receiving something without any preparation for it, it's not appreciated. But when, through our effort and our spiritual work, we attain the desire to give, it'll become something precious. We're separate from the Creator, and the proof is that we're not feeling God. The moment we become attached to God, we feel God. So therefore we can do all sorts of things that are against God's desire, and say things that are against God's desire, and think things that are against God's desire, because we're not connected to God. Potentially, since there is within every man and woman a divine soul, so if we reveal the divine soul that has the characteristic of giving, then with our divine soul we connect to God and can feel God, understand God, and won't be making any action against God's desire. But everything will be in harmony with God's will. Think about this. It's written, on that day God will be one and God's name will be one. What does it mean on that day? In the future. Name in numerical equivalent is ratzon, is will, desire. So on that day, our will, our desire, when it becomes fixed in the state of loving others, will be one with God's desire. On that day, God's will and our will be one. The Rebbe's asked, what do we do when the strength of the desire to receive is ruling on us? So the Rebbe says we'll learn about this in number 14. The Wisdom of the Kabbalah is giving us the concepts of what to do. All the Wisdom of the Kabbalah is giving the progressions and how to have control of the desire to receive and how to make use of it in a positive way. There's a question. One of the ways of connecting to God is to connect to a tzaddik, a righteous person. How do we learn about the Baal HaSulam and his ways? Just through the holy books? Or is there another way? The Rebbe answers that the Baal HaSulam has passed on and is buried on the Har HaMenuchot in Yerushalayim. This is a grave that has a structure above it. There aren't many graves like that there. when you go into the big parking lot of the Har Menuchot, you turn right and you go down, and within 2-3 minutes, we come to the grave of the Baal HaSulam, and there's a structure above it. What am I wanting to say? To connect to a tzaddik is to connect to a living person. The Baal HaSulam is passed on. What remains to us is wonderful. The books. These are holy, divine books that have great light. And this is what we need to do. We need to connect to the books. And there's many types of books. Today, more than ever, there's lots to learn. Each one to learn according to what's speaking to the person. And these things I say as a preparation for Lag BaOmer. On Lag BaOmer, this year, no one's going to be able to come close to Meron. And today, even if people try to come close to the Kever on Meron of Rabbi Shimon, you'll see that everything is locked. Is this a breakdown for us? Of course not. There's no breakdown. Because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is found in the book of the Zohar Kadosh. Someone who wants to connect to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai needs to make effort to connect to the books of the Zohar. I'm not saying it's easy, but someone who wants to have something with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that's the way. To travel to Meron with the book of Tehillim is something very good and is very important. But it's much less effective than learning the book of Rabbi Shimon. The whole soul of Rabbi Shimon, all of Rabbi Shimon's desires are in the Zohar. That's where we find Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, not in Meron. Travel to Meron has something to it, but it's not connecting to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. That's a mistake. So I'm actually very happy that this year we can't travel to Meron. And I'm very happy that we can't get close to the Kotel, because we need to understand that traveling to the holy places is a skula, but the real holy places is in ourselves. When we're traveling to Meron or to the Kotel, could be a running away from ourselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? God wants to give us here that the holy places are ourselves, within ourselves, within our minds and our hearts, in our essence. These need to be holy. We want to connect to the Ari HaKadosh. This is the Ari HaKadosh, what we're learning here. This book, the Peticha LeChochmat HaKabbalah. This is the Ari HaKadosh. It's hard, it's not easy. If we learn this material and make effort, there's great reward. This is the Ari here, and the Zohar is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So this is what I'm saying in the answer to the question. To connect to the tzaddik means a living tzaddik, not a tzaddik that is passed on. A tzaddik who is passed on is left books, and through the books we can connect to them. But this work of connecting to a tzaddik needs to be a living tzaddik. So remember this well.